Armand Vale stood in the darkness of his childhood home, holding the small security camera like a confession he wasn't ready to make. The old Victorian house on Maple Street had been broken into twice in 3 months, and though nothing valuable was taken, the violation gnawed at him. His wife, Lena Moreau, had suggested selling it, but Armand couldn't let go. Not of the house where his mother had sung lullabies, where memories lived in every creaking floorboard. "Just install the cameras," he muttered to himself, mounting one in the living room corner. Lena didn't know. She was home, their real home, the modern apartment across town, probably reading or watching television. They'd been married 8 years, and somewhere along the way, conversations had become transactions. "Did you pay the electric bill? Your mother called. I'll be late tonight." He missed the woman he'd married. Lena, with her fox-like features, those striking amber eyes that tilted upward at the corners, the blonde, wavy hair that cascaded past her shoulders, and those delicate fox ears that twitched when she was nervous or excited. Her tail, thick and golden with a white tip, used to wrap around his waist when they embraced. She was vulpine, one of the rare hybrid species that blended human and animal traits so seamlessly that she moved through the world with an otherworldly grace. When they first met at an architectural exhibition, she'd been examining his blueprint for a community center, her tail swishing thoughtfully. "You design for people who need shelter, not just buildings," she'd said, touching his arm with her slender, human-like hands. "That's rare." They'd fallen fast and deep. Lena worked as a trauma counselor, spending long hours with broken families, and Armand worked night shifts, designing structures that would outlast their creators. Opposites, they'd thought, that complemented each other perfectly. But lately, Lena came home exhausted, her ears flattened against her blonde hair, her tail motionless. She barely looked at him anymore. Armand told himself it was work stress, that they'd reconnect eventually. He told himself many things. The camera blinked red, recording the empty house. Armand didn't know then that he'd installed something far more dangerous than protection. He'd installed truth.
3 weeks later, Armand sat in his office at the architectural firm, the city skyline glowing orange beyond his window. It was 2 a.m., his usual creative hours, but tonight concentration eluded him. He opened his laptop and, almost unconsciously, clicked the security app. The living room appeared on screen, dusty furniture covered in white sheets, his mother's old piano in the corner. Empty. He was about to close it when he noticed the timestamp, 6:47 p.m. yesterday. He'd been at work. The house should have been empty. His finger hovered over the trackpad. He scrolled backward through the footage. Then he saw her. Lena entered the frame, her blonde waves catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Her fox ears were perked forward, alert and alive in a way they hadn't been around him in months. Her tail swished with an energy he'd forgotten she possessed. She wasn't alone. A man followed her inside, tall, broad-shouldered, human. Armand didn't recognize him. They stood close, too close, and the man tucked a strand of Lena's hair behind one of her fox ears with a tenderness that made Armand's chest constrict. "No," he whispered to the empty office. He watched as Lena led the stranger to the couch. They sat facing each other, and she was crying, her ears folded back, her tail wrapped around herself protectively. The man pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face against his chest, her shoulders shaking. Armand's hands trembled as he fast-forwarded. The embrace lasted minutes. Then the man tilted Lena's face upward, wiping her tears with his thumbs, and kissed her. Not a brief kiss, not an accident. Lena's ears flattened completely, a sign of surrender, of trust, of intimacy. Her tail unwound and wrapped loosely around the man's waist as she kissed him back with a hunger that Armand recognized from their early years together. Her hands, those beautiful, delicate hands, gripped the man's shirt as though he were the only solid thing in her collapsing world. Armin slammed the laptop shut, his breathing ragged. The office walls seemed to close in. He wanted to scream, to throw something, to call Lena and demand answers. Instead, he sat in crushing silence, replaying every moment of their marriage, searching for where he'd lost her. Armin didn't go home that night, or the next. He checked into a hotel downtown, telling Lena via text that a project required his immediate attention. She responded with a simple, "Okay, no questions asked," and that hurt worse than the footage itself. He watched more recordings, torturing himself with evidence. The affair had been going on for at least 2 months, always at the old house, always in the afternoons when Armin worked nights. They talked for hours about Lena's difficult cases at the counseling center, about the man's recent divorce, about loneliness and understanding and being seen. "He doesn't notice me anymore," Lena said in one recording, her voice breaking. Her ears drooped sadly. "Armin works all night, sleeps all day. We're roommates who occasionally say hello. I'm so tired of being invisible." The man, whose name Armin learned was Daniel, stroked her hair gently. "You're the most visible person I've ever known. When you walk into a room, everything else disappears." Armin watched his wife bloom under this stranger's attention. Her tail would wag slightly when Daniel arrived. Her ears would perk forward eagerly. She laughed, actually laughed, in a way she hadn't with Armin in years. One recording showed them on the couch, Lena's head in Daniel's lap while he read poetry aloud. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, one of her hands resting on his knee. When he finished reading, she pulled him down for a kiss that deepened quickly, her tail wrapping tightly around him as his hands explored the curve of her waist, tangling in her blonde waves. Armin closed the laptop before it went further. He'd seen enough. On the 7th night, he made his decision. He packed his essentials, drafted a simple note. "I know about Daniel. I'm sorry I stopped seeing you. I'm sorry for everything," and left it on their kitchen counter. Then Armin Vale drove north along the coast until the city lights disappeared behind him. He drove until his phone stopped ringing with Lena's increasingly frantic calls. He drove until the highway gave way to a small seaside town called Thornwick Bay, where nobody knew his name or his broken marriage, where he could disappear into the silence of his own grief.
Thornwick Bay smelled of salt and old wood. Armin rented a small cottage overlooking the harbor and spent his days walking the empty beaches, trying to outpace the images burned into his memory. Lena's tail wrapped around another man, her fox ears flat with pleasure, her lips forming words of love that weren't meant for him. 3 weeks into his self-imposed exile, he discovered the Lighthouse Bookshop on Harbor Street. The building was narrow, wedged between a bakery and a fishing supply store, its windows displaying rare first editions and handwritten recommendations. Inside, the shop smelled like aged paper and lavender. Floor-to-ceiling shelves created intimate corridors, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 40s with auburn hair pinned loosely, reading glasses perched on her nose, wearing a cardigan despite the mild weather. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Just browsing," Armin replied. She nodded and returned to her book. No pressure, no sales pitch, just quiet coexistence. Armin found himself returning daily, sometimes buying books, often just reading in the worn leather chair by the window. The woman, whose name he learned was Elira Rowan when he finally asked, never seemed to mind. "You're running from something," Elira said one rainy afternoon, startling him from a novel about shipwrecks. Armin looked up. "That obvious?" "I recognize the look. I wore it for 2 years after my husband died." She poured tea from a thermos, offering him a cup. "You don't have to talk about it, but you don't have to pretend you're fine either." So Armin didn't pretend. Over the following weeks, during slow afternoons in the bookstore, Elira told Armin about Lena. Not the affair, not yet, but the slow erosion of their marriage. How they'd stopped touching, stopped talking about anything that mattered. How he'd buried himself in work while Lena drowned in hers. "Did you love her?" Elira asked. "Completely. Maybe that was the problem. I thought love meant providing, protecting, being strong. I didn't realize she needed me to just be present." Elira set down her tea carefully. "My husband was a fisherman, strong, silent type. I used to beg him to talk to me, really talk. He'd just kiss my forehead and say, 'I'm here, aren't I?' Then one day he wasn't. Storm took him." "I'm sorry." "Me too. But I learned something in all that grief. You can't love someone by proximity alone. You have to choose them, daily, actively, not just exist in the same space." Those words stayed with Armin. He and Elira began having dinner together after the bookstore closed, cooking simple meals in her apartment above the shop. They talked about everything: architecture and literature, loss and hope, the specific ache of loving someone who'd become a stranger. One evening, as they washed dishes side by side, Elira's hand brushed his. She didn't pull away, neither did he. "I should tell you why I really left. I installed cameras in my old house. I watched my wife fall in love with someone else. Lena, she's vulpine. Her fox ears would perk up when he arrived. Her tail would wrap around him. All the things she used to do with me." Elira turned to face him, drying her hands slowly. "And you left without confronting her?" "What was there to say? I'd already lost her long before he arrived. I just didn't want to admit it." Elira stepped closer, her hand finding his cheek. "Armin, you're allowed to grieve, but you're also allowed to heal. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He kissed her then, tentatively at first, asking permission with every gentle touch. Elira kissed him back, and it felt like surfacing after being underwater too long. They moved to her bedroom, two wounded people choosing tenderness over fear. Later, wrapped in soft sheets with Elira's head on his chest, Armin felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Not because he'd forgotten Lena, the pain was still there, sharp and real, but because he'd chosen to be present for this moment, this woman, this quiet form of healing. "Stay," Elira whispered. "Okay," Armin said, and meant it.
4 months after Armin disappeared, Lena found him. He was sketching the harbor from a bench near the lighthouse when a familiar voice said his name. He turned to find her standing there, blonde waves wind-tossed, fox ears pressed anxiously against her head, tail wrapped protectively around her waist. She wore the blue dress he'd bought her for their 5th anniversary. "How did you—" "Your credit card. You used it at a bookstore here." Lena's amber eyes were red-rimmed. "Armin, please, we need to talk." They walked along the beach, maintaining careful distance. Lena explained everything: how her affair with Daniel started as friendship during a difficult case, how it escalated when she felt invisible at home, how it ended when she realized she'd been seeking in Daniel what she should have fought for with Armin. "I'm not asking you to take me back," Lena said, her voice breaking, her ears flattened with shame. "I just need you to know I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry. I broke us, and I'll carry that forever." Armin watched the waves crash against the rocks. 6 months ago, those words would have devastated him. Now, they simply made him sad. "You didn't break us alone, Lena. I stopped seeing you long before Daniel did. I loved you, but I forgot to show you. I was there, but I wasn't present." Lena's tail unwound slightly. "So what now?" "Now you go back to your life. You heal. You find someone who sees you every single day, not just when it's convenient." Armin turned to face her fully. "I found someone here, Elira. She's teaching me what it means to choose love actively, not just assume it exists because we share a space." Pain flashed across Lena's face. Her ears flattened completely. Her tail drooped, but she nodded. Is she kind to you? Very. And I'm present for her in ways I never was for you. That's not your fault. That's me learning who I need to be. They stood in silence, the ocean wind carrying away words unspoken. Finally, Lena stepped forward and hugged him, a brief, gentle embrace that felt like goodbye. Her tail brushed his leg one last time. I hope you're happy, Armin, truly. I hope you are too. He watched her walk back toward the parking lot, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sun, her tail swaying with the same grace that had first captivated him years ago. But this time, watching her leave didn't break him. It freed him. That evening, Armin returned to the Lighthouse bookshop. Elira was shelving new arrivals, humming softly to herself. When she saw him, her face brightened. How was your day? She asked. Complicated, beautiful, necessary. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Lena came. We talked. We said goodbye properly. Elira squeezed his hand. Are you okay? I am, because I'm choosing to be here, with you, right now, not haunted by what was or afraid of what's next, just present. She kissed him, sweet and unhurried, and Armin Vale understood finally what he'd been too blind to see before. Love isn't about surveillance or possession or proximity. Love is choosing to show up day after day for someone who chooses the same for you. It's presence, not perfection. It's rebuilding trust in the quiet moments, the shared meals, the late-night conversations where two wounded hearts decide to heal together. The cameras in his old house still recorded empty rooms, but Armin no longer watched the footage. He'd learned the truth he wasn't ready for, that some loves must end so deeper, more honest ones can begin. And in Thornwick Bay, in a bookshop that smelled of lavender and old paper, Armin finally came home. The end.